Hello and welcome to the live question time for the Enology chapter of Vine and Wine Mooc. My name is Elaine, I'm from Montpellier Supagro. We have here with us two professors. We have Aude Vernet, Professor of Enology, who is conducting research on colloids and physico-chemical interactions. We have Laetitia Mooc, who is lecturer in chemistry applied to enology, and her research work focuses on the identification of tannin oxidation markers. So, thank you for being with us. We have had many questions, far too many questions for us to be able to answer them all, but we'll try to do our best. So, let us start with a question for Laetitia. Laetitia, let's go back to the two types of fermentation. Can you specify the sequence in time of alcoholic fermentation and malolactic fermentation? Are they one after the other, or can they take place at the same time? And for red wine, does malolactic fermentation take place after pressing?
Okay. So the malolactic fermentation allows the reduction of the acidity of the wine by transforming malic acid into the lactic acid. Usually, the malolactic fermentation made by the lactic bacteria takes place after the alcoholic fermentation, once all the sugar have been consumed. It can also take place at the same time. However, the lactic bacteria can also degrade sugar and cause an increase of the acidity with the appearance of lactic characters. In order to limit such a risk, it's preferable that the malolactic fermentation is done after the alcoholic fermentation.
Okay, so I have a question for Aude on vinification. In the red wine making chapter, we talked about two techniques for vinification, using whole bunches and destemming and crushing. So do these two methods produce identical wine? Does the whole cluster method correspond to carbonic maceration?
So these are two different questions. Right, the first one, so destemming and crushing versus full benches. In fact, the difference mainly lies in the presence of the stems, which can be of interest because they can bring tannins. So usually stems are used when the grape variety has only low tannins in the skin, and this the use of the stem allows increasing the extraction and the level of tannins in the wine, and so to stabilize the color. So it's really interesting with given varieties, specific varieties. And it is not the same than carbonic maceration. In carbonic maceration, the objective is to favor, in fact, an anaerobic metabolism of the grape cells. So for this, we need to have as less as free-run juices as possible, but in addition, we need an atmosphere of carbon dioxide. So the tank is first filled with carbon dioxide, and then the wood benches are sent to the tank under this atmosphere of carbon dioxide. So carbonic maceration, it's a specific way of winemaking which allow to the formation of specific aromas, especially fruity and spicy aromas.
Okay, thank you. I have another question for you. We have somebody here who is planning to do an alcoholic fermentation with whole uncrushed Merlot berries directly put into barrels. And he is asking, or they are asking, what they need to plan in particular compared to a more classical integral fermentation with
crushing.
With crushing.
I don't understand exactly the objective, but without crushing, there are some risks because in barrels, especially, the white related to the harvest remain quite low, and the risk is that at the end there will still be some entire grape berries within the barrel. So the risk is first that it will be long to extract the juice, and so it can delay the alcoholic fermentation. And another risk is to have residual sugars at the end in the marc, so the risks of development of lactic bacteria. So I think this is the risks. These are the risks, and I don't see exactly the interest, especially in terms of extraction of tannins and anthocyanins from the skins. It may limit these extractions.
Okay, thank you. Laetitia, another question for you. It's about white wines. What happens to the marc after pressing for white wines? Is there a use for this marc?
Yeah. So the marc is the solid part of the grape, the skin, the seed. So after crushing, the juice is fermented, is a must, and the solid part is removed. The marc can be brought to the distillery. It can wash with water to remove sugar. And in the skin and in the seed, we have polyphenol tannins. So we can also remove tannins to use in the food industry or in the pharmaceutical industry. And in the seed, as we have oil, we can also remove the oil of the seed.
Okay, and another question for you too. Is the press that is used for pressing white wine the same? Sorry, the question is pressing the white wine the same as the press? I'm sorry, I don't get the question exactly. The pressure, is the pressure in the press for white wine the same?
Than in the press for?
I'm sorry, I don't get this question. So,
est-ce que la presse utilisée pour les vins blancs et les vins rouges est la même? Est-ce qu'on
for red wine.
La même pression.
Okay.
Right.
So as red wine.
Okay. In the
same,
for the white wine, the crushing is before the alcoholic fermentation. So we use a program of crushing to extract
pressing,
to remove the juice. And in the red wine, the pressing is after the alcoholic fermentation. So we can use the same type of press. And the program of the press depends of that you want to do. You can optimize the program.
Usually with white wine, you start at much lower pressure to avoid extraction from skins, whereas in red wine you don't mind.
Yeah.
So you can use directly high pressure, which means
Yeah.
in the order
Yeah.
of 1.5 to 2 bars.
Mhm.
It's not that high.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just to avoid getting the color from the skins.
In white wines, yes, it's
Yes.
to avoid extraction from skins, not color in white varieties,
no.
but tannins and potassium, which decrease the
Aroma.
acidity.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay, thank you. So, order. Can flash pasteurization applied to wine reduce or even replace the use of SO2?
No, not exactly, because the flash pasteurization is a treatment which is performed for the microbiological stabilization of the wine. So the objective is to reduce or even kills all the microorganisms in the wine. So in that sense, as sulfur dioxide is used to prevent microorganism development, it could help reducing the sulfur dioxide level. However, on the other hand, sulfur dioxide is also an antioxidant and a very powerful antioxidant. So flash pasteurization allows to get rid of the risks of microorganism spoilage, but SO2 is still needed to prevent oxidation.
Okay, thanks. So, are there alternatives to treatment with sulfur dioxide? And what traces are left in the final product? And do you think they could be responsible for headaches in sensitive subjects, people drinking the wine?
The molecules which are proposed as alternative for sulfur dioxide. So concerning the headaches, I don't know. So there are some molecules which are proposed and tried now to replace the sulfur dioxide in the wine. So these molecules are antioxidants. They must play the same role. And as additives, of course, you will still find this molecule at the end in the wine. Are they responsible for problems, health problems? I don't think so, but
maybe it hasn't been proven yet. I don't know.
yes, maybe I think that the trials are underway, and it's a little early to.
And there's another very similar question here saying, what are the residues of treatment in the vineyard that we can find in the final product? And can they be eliminated by filtration?
Usually, these molecules, residues of treatments, are very small, very, very small, and hydrophobic molecules. So the filtration cannot remove them because the retention is made concern larger compounds, much larger compounds and particles. These residues are removed by adsorption on solids for fibers, bentonites. So it's not a filtration, but they can be removed by adsorption, rather.
Okay. So I have a question on breeding and conservation. They're talking about how the Romans put their wine into pottery pots. Why do we not use pottery anymore? Do you have any idea why we are now using glass rather than pottery for wine?
Pottery was an old way to store and transport the wine. Glass is much more safe in terms of control of the oxidation because it's not porous. You can control oxygen dissolution using just by the corks. It only occurs at the level of the cork, and so it's much safe concerning the conservation of the wine, and concerning, I think it's aging, no?
Oh,
Aging?
there is a question about aging in French oak barrels.
No, but aging, breeding, is breeding meaning aging?
Yes.
Aging is different than conservation and storage. During aging, you need some oxygen dissolution, but usually it's not done in amphora. It's done in barrels.
Okay, it's breathing, not breeding. That's what it is.
I think.
Yes. And so also there's another question about American oak barrels compared to French oak barrels. How do you choose the oak that you're going to use? Is there a difference?
So there are differences between oaks, of course, and the choice of the oak depends. The objective of oak, there are two objectives in fact. First, the porosity of the oak allow a slow dissolution of the oxygen, which is very important for the chemical changes that occur during the aging. And this second important factor when aging a wine in barrels is the extraction of compounds of interest from the oak. And this compound may be elagitannins or aromas. So depending on the oak origin, and not only of the origin, depending on the heat treatment performed on the oak wood, you will introduce different aromas, different types of aromas. So yes, the origin of the oak has an importance, but also the treatment
of the wood. And so,
treatment of the wood.
Okay, and so the French treatment of the wood and the American treatment of the wood.
I think it's more the oak variety, which introduce different aromas. It's more the oak variety than the modulated by the treatment, but the variety is important.
Okay. So for tasting, you say that, I don't know who would want to answer this one. I'll ask the question and then we'll see who wants to answer. You say in the Mooc that old vintages must be decanted. However, this person who has asked the question has read that this should be avoided so as not to rush these old wines and to weaken them. So how do you feel about that? Who would like to?
Settling is an operation that consists in separating the deposit from the liquid part of the wine. This involves by transferring the wine into a carafe. The immediate consequence of this action is that the wine is
saturated in oxygen.
Yes, saturated in oxygen. Yeah, because the contact with oxygen is violent. That is made detrimental to the wine if the wine has a low concentration in tannins. However, this operation allowing to remove the reductive character, often present in the harder wine after a long storage
in bottles.
In the bottle, yeah. So the settling is justified for the harder wine. With a high tannins content, and that you have a deposit, because the deposit can be have an impact on the tasting.
It's not very.
Yeah. Well,
when you drink the wine and you have some
particles,
particles in the mouth, it's not
good.
It's not good.
Yes. Although the decanting, I imagine, has to be very gradual and gently done. It's not just tipping it into a carafe.
No.
Yeah.
And I think that when we said saturated in oxygen, it's little exaggerated.
Yeah.
But you dissolve quite a significant
Yeah.
amount of oxygen.
Okay, so let me see. I think that's going to be all for today. We still have so many questions that we're just not going to be able to answer. I'm sorry about that, but maybe on the Mooc we can put some written answers in, and you can have a look to see the answers to your questions in written form rather than here live. So thank you very much for coming, and we're going to do this again in 2 minutes in French with Cécile. And next week is the last live, because you're very nearly at the end of this Mooc. Last but not least. Thank you very much.
Thank
See you
you.
next week.
Thank you.